Introduction and the attack. Greetings, friends. I am Vitaly Portnikov. Tonight, drones attacked the Russian capital. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin reported the destruction of 15 unmanned aerial vehicles in the airspace of the Russian capital. Numerous Russian public pages reported the same, and Moscow residents shared video footage of explosions in their city. Thus, it was confirmed that Moscow's famous air defense system also has holes, and there are no safe places on the territory of the Russian Federation today. Even in Moscow, one cannot feel safe while Russia continues its cruel and unjust war against our country. Russia's two Achilles heels. I have always said that, actually, Russia has, so to speak, two Achilles heels when it comes to restraining the Russian regime and forcing it to peace. 1. The oil industry and economy. The first is the oil industry and oil refining. As we can see, lately, Ukrainian special services have been acting quite effectively, destroying the capacities of the oil refining industry of the Russian Federation and even reaching its oil production, as is happening, for example, with Lukoil's oil production platforms in the Caspian. Thus, Russia's energy capabilities are shrinking with every new week of the war against Ukraine. This cannot help but affect the economy of the Russian Federation, especially against the backdrop of new Western sanctions. If Russia cannot use the capacities of its oil refineries, much more crude oil appears for sale. And now, a large number of leading enterprises, even in countries like China and India, which were actual sponsors of the Russian budget since 2022 and helped President Putin continue the war against Ukraine, are refusing purchases so as not to create new opportunities for conflict with the United States and not to fall under new American sanctions. Thus, Russia will have to not only introduce new serious discounts on its own oil, which in turn leads to a decrease in revenues, but also reduce the oil production itself because there is simply nowhere to put such a quantity of raw materials on the market now. I am not even mentioning that when Russian oil refineries do not work, Russia has to buy the necessary products no longer for rubles. This also has a serious impact on the state of the Russian budget and creates opportunities for a future economic and social crisis. 2. Moscow and political stability. The second Achilles heel is Moscow. Russian authorities, any authorities, always monitored the stability in the capital specifically. It was considered that one could deal with the provinces without any problems. Even atrocities in the provincial regions of the Russian Federation, and formerly the Soviet Union, and formerly the Russian Empire, did not interest the residents of other territories much, where there were no uprisings, explosions, or expressions of dissatisfaction against the central government. This is relevant for events of the distant past, and it is relevant for the situation with the Putin regime. Let's recall, for example, the months-long protests in Khabarovsk in defense of the local governor Fergal. This ended with practically nothing. The Russian government simply ignored these protests, and the governor, who did not fit into the criminal clan system of power in the Russian Federation, remained in prison for many long years. But in Moscow, as once in the times of the Russian Empire in St. Petersburg, it is different. The Russian imperial power, and in the first years of Soviet power, the Bolsheviks, especially monitored the stable situation precisely in St. Petersburg and later in Petrograd. And when they failed to monitor it, the February Revolution of 1917 occurred, and then the October coup. And when it turned out that the communist regime could not hold Moscow, and this became obvious in August 1991, the end came for the Bolshevik communists themselves. Thus, Putin perfectly understands that war can come to the entire territory of Russia. But Moscow is different. The closing of capital airports, the destruction of oil refineries near Moscow, explosions, this is already a sign of serious instability for all of Russia. Forcing peace. If Putin cannot protect the expensive Muscovites, if they are also forced to hide from explosions resulting from drone strikes on strategic objects of the Russian Federation located in the very heart of this aggressive chauvinistic state, then what security, what protection can an ordinary Russian count on? We must understand the Russian state philosophy and the Russian everyday habit, which is actually focused on Moscow, to realize how important calm in the Russian capital is for Putin and his criminal group. And tonight, there was no calm in the Russian capital. So, undermining stability in Moscow is a coercion to peace just as significant as the destruction of the Russian Federation's income. We understand that the fate of this war is being decided not in negotiations in Berlin, it is being decided in the wallets of Russians, in their sense of danger, which must become all-encompassing. And to create a real threat to the further functioning of one of the vilest and most terrorist regimes of the modern world, the regime of Russian Chekists. Conclusion: when a drone arrives in Moscow, it means that Putin begins, albeit not strongly but perceptibly, to fear for his future and the future of that terrible regime that the Chekists created in Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Thank you, friends. Stay on this channel, subscribe to it, subscribe to my social networks. Victory and peace to you. Good luck.